The security footage was grainy, but Park Ji-soo could see her perfectly. A little girl, maybe 6, maybe 7, sitting on the cold concrete floor of the parking garage on sublevel 2, back against a rusted Hyundai, knees pulled to her chest. It was 11:47 at night. He leaned closer to the monitor. The girl wasn't crying. She wasn't on a phone. She was just sitting there, very still, with a small backpack in her lap, like she was waiting for a school bus that was running very, very late. Ji-soo pushed back from his desk. He ran the Dongwon Group, one of Seoul's most quietly powerful private investment conglomerates. On paper, it was asset management, real estate development, logistics consulting. Off paper, it was the kind of organization that made problems disappear and ensured the right city officials voted the right way. He hadn't gotten here by being soft. He hadn't stayed here by being careless. He should have called building security and gone back to his reports. Instead, he grabbed his jacket. The elevator to sublevel 2 felt like it took forever. When the doors opened, the smell hit him first. Engine oil, damp concrete, the particular cold of underground spaces that never quite warm up. The fluorescent lights buzzed. 3 of them were flickering. He found her exactly where the camera showed her. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, and she didn't flinch. That was the first thing that surprised him. Children usually flinched around him. He had the kind of face that made adults stand straighter, so children tended to go quiet and wide-eyed. This girl just looked at him calmly, like she'd already decided he wasn't a threat, or like she'd already decided it didn't matter.
"Hello," she said.
Her Korean was slow and deliberate.
Practiced.
The accent was West African, soft consonants, musical rhythm underneath the careful syllables. "I'm not doing anything bad." Ji-soo crouched down to her level. "I know. What are you doing down here?" "Waiting for my mom." "Where is your mom?" The girl pointed upward. "Working. She cleans the building. She said I have to stay here and be very quiet because if the boss finds out I'm here, she'll lose her job." Ji-soo said nothing for a moment. "I am the boss." The girl's eyes went wide. For the first time, something flickered across her face, not quite fear, but the recognition of danger. Then she pressed her lips together, lifted her chin slightly, and said, "Are you going to fire her?" "How long have you been sitting here?" "Since 8 o'clock. It was almost midnight. Nearly 4 hours. On a concrete floor. In the cold. Is this the first time you've come here with your mother?" The girl shook her head slowly. Then she said it, the thing that stopped Park Ji-soo completely, the thing that cracked something open in a chest that hadn't been cracked open in a very long time. "My mom sleeps in her car so I can eat," she whispered. Not like she was asking for pity, just like she was explaining something important, something she needed him to understand. "When the money is short," she says she already ate. But I know she didn't. I hear her stomach. And sometimes I wake up and she's not in the bed. She's in the car in the parking lot outside our building because she says it's warmer in the car than paying to run the heater. Ji-soo stayed very still. "She works every day," the girl continued. "Even when her back hurts. Even when she has a cold. She never misses. But they cut her hours last month and now we don't have enough." She looked at her backpack. "I brought homework. I told her I wouldn't bother anyone." "What's your name?" "Adiz. But my mom calls me Ada." "And your mother's name?" "Kayamika. But everyone here calls her Chi-Chi." Ada looked up at him. "She's a really good cleaner. She works very hard. Please don't fire her." Ji-soo stood. Something was moving through him. Not quite anger. Not quite grief. Something older than both. He knew this story. He'd lived this story on the other side of it a long time ago. "Stay here," he said. "I'll be right back." He found her on the 14th floor. Kayamika Obi was on her hands and knees scrubbing the grout between the lobby tiles outside the executive conference rooms, even though executive conference rooms didn't get used at midnight and the grout didn't need scrubbing. She was working with a kind of ferocious focus that looked less like diligence and more like desperation, the focus of someone who has decided that if she just works hard enough, long enough, perfectly enough, the thing she's afraid of will leave her alone. She heard his footsteps and looked up. She was young, early 30s, maybe. Her face was striking even underneath the exhaustion, high cheekbones, deep-set eyes that had shadows beneath them like bruises. She was wearing a uniform 2 sizes too large. Her hands, Jisoo noticed, were raw, cracked along the knuckles. She scrambled to her feet. I'm almost finished with this section, sir. I'll start the east corridor immediately. Your daughter is in the parking garage. The color left her face. She has been there since 8 o'clock, Jisoo said. It is midnight. Kayamika's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes filled. She blinked hard. I'm sorry. My neighbor who watches her is sick, and I couldn't afford to miss tonight. I told her to stay hidden. She's a good girl. She doesn't bother anyone. Her voice cracked. Please don't fire me. I'll find another arrangement. Come with me. Sir, I still have 3 floors. The floors will wait. Come. He watched her face cycle through a dozen calculations, weighing the risk of following against the risk of refusing, trying to read him, trying to figure out which response would save her job. He recognized that calculation too. He'd watched his mother do it 100 times. Now, he said, not unkindly, your daughter is cold. They rode the elevator down in silence. When the doors opened and Ada saw her mother, she shot to her feet. Mama. Kayamika crossed the garage in 3 steps and pulled her daughter into her arms, crouching down, holding Ada's face in both hands, checking her over. Her hands were shaking. I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry. Are you okay? Are you warm? I'm okay, Mama. I brought my spelling homework. I did the whole page. Okay. Good girl. Good girl. Kayamika pressed her forehead to her daughter's, closed her eyes. When she opened them and looked up at Jisoo, something in her expression had shifted. The fear was still there, but underneath it was something fiercer. Maternal, cornered, ready to fight. We can go, she said. I'll collect my things. I understand. You're not fired. She blinked. Come to my office. Both of you. His office occupied the corner of the 32nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Seoul glittered below like scattered embers. Ada pressed her nose to the glass and said wow very quietly, and something about that small word in that large room did something complicated to Jisoo's chest. He sat across from Kayamika. Ada had fallen asleep on the leather couch with her backpack as a pillow, so quickly and completely that it was obvious she was used to sleeping in uncomfortable places. You were a nurse, Jisoo said. Kayamika stiffened. How do you know that? Your employment file. You listed it. You have a nursing diploma from the University of Nigeria and 3 years of clinical experience. He looked at her. Why are you cleaning floors? Nigerian credentials aren't recognized here without going through a full recertification process. It takes 2 years and costs money I don't have. She met his eyes steadily. So I clean. Your hours were cut last month. Her jaw tightened. Yes. By who? Operations manager. Mr. Huang. Jisoo filed that name. Why? Kayamika was quiet for a moment. He said I was too slow. But I wasn't too slow. My numbers are in the top third of the night shift team. A pause. I reported a safety violation 6 weeks ago. A broken floor buffer that had already injured 2 workers. He told me to mind my own work. I filed the written report anyway. Jisoo looked at her. And a month later, your hours were cut. I can't prove it's connected. You don't need to prove it. She watched him carefully. Who are you? I mean, I know who you are on paper. But who are you actually? It was a bold question. Most people in her position wouldn't have asked it. He found he appreciated it. Someone who grew up watching his mother work herself into the ground for people who saw her as replaceable. He said it simply, without drama. Someone who got power and sometimes uses it badly and is trying to figure out what to use it for instead. Kayamika said nothing for a long moment. Then, my husband used to say that power is just a tool. The morality is in the hand that holds it. Jisoo looked at her. Used to say. She glanced at Ada sleeping. When she looked back, her face had closed slightly, not shut down, just carefully maintained. He died 2 years ago. Back home. Fever that moved to his kidneys. By the time we got him to a hospital that could treat it, she stopped. Ada was 4. She barely remembers him. Why Seoul? My brother-in-law sponsored my visa. He said there was work here. He was right, there was work. Just not the kind I trained for. She looked at her cracked hands. I send money home every month. My mother-in-law is raising my husband's younger siblings. If I stop sending money, they stop eating. Jisoo stood and walked to his window. Below, Seoul ran its ceaseless nighttime business, delivery scooters weaving, the Han River a distant ribbon of reflected light. I'm reassigning you, he said. To what? I have a corporate health and wellness program that has been run by a consultant who charges me 3 times what she's worth and delivers half the results. You have clinical training, organizational knowledge, and apparently the courage to file safety reports when you see something wrong. I need someone who can actually do the job. Kayamika stared at him. You're offering me a position. I'm offering you your correct salary. Double what you're making now. Your credential recertification will be funded and completed on company time. Health insurance. And a workspace where Ada can come if your childcare falls through. There's a conference room on 12 that nobody uses before 9. Her eyes were shining. She was fighting it. Losing. Why, she said. I'm a night shift cleaner who your operations manager already tried to push out. Why would you do this? Jisoo was quiet for a moment. Because your daughter told me you sleep in your car, so she can eat. He looked at Ada's sleeping face, small and peaceful, cheek pressed to her backpack. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since she said it. Kayamika pressed her hand over her mouth. A single tear slid down her face. She wiped it away quickly, efficiently, like someone who had trained herself not to let it get further than that. There's a condition, Jisoo said. She straightened. What condition? Tell me everything about Hwang. The safety violations. The hours cuts. Anyone else he's done this to. I want all of it. A long pause. And if I do, then I deal with him correctly. Something shifted in her expression. Not softness, something more complicated than softness. Recognition maybe. The look of someone who has spent years waiting for a system to work and is being told it might work, just once, if they trust the right person. I have documentation, she said quietly. I kept everything. I expected you would. Jisoo almost smiled. I'll have my assistant set up your new workspace tomorrow. Tonight, you're both going home in my car. We can take the subway. My car. He said it firmly, but not harshly. Ada is 7 years old, and it is past midnight. Take the car. Kayamika looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay. She started the new role on a Monday. By Wednesday, the maintenance workers were flagging her down in the hallways to tell her about issues they hadn't wanted to escalate through official channels. By Friday, she had filed 7 documented complaints about conditions on floors 9 through 17. Jisoo read the reports in his office. Then he read them again. The complaints were meticulously detailed. Not just this is broken, but this has been broken since March. Here is who reported it. Here is who failed to act. Here is the downstream health risk to workers who spend 8-hour shifts in this environment. She had done in 4 days what his operations oversight committee hadn't done in 2 years. He called his head of operations. I want a meeting with Hwang. He's on vacation until... Cancel it. Hwang Bonsik was 53, thick-necked, with a particular confidence of a middle manager who has never been seriously challenged. He walked into Jisoo's office and looked briefly at Kayamika, who was sitting in the chair beside Jisoo's desk, and then looked away from her. The practiced invisibility of a man who had spent years looking through people who cleaned his floors. Then he looked back. Something moved across his face. Recalibration. Sit down, Hwang, Jisoo said. Hwang Saturday, sir. If this is about the night shift restructuring, I want to be clear that the hour reductions were performance-based. We pulled the performance metrics, Jisoo said. Obi was in the top 30% of the shift team. Her cleaning inspection scores were above average. Her lateness record was 0. He let that sit for a moment. You cut her hours 1 month after she filed a written safety report documenting a defective machine that had already sent 2 workers to the clinic. Hwang's jaw shifted. Those 2 incidents were minor. One of them was a tendon strain. The worker is still in physiotherapy. Sir, I had operational reasons. You had a report that made you look negligent, Jisoo said. So you made the person who filed it too desperate to file another one. He leaned forward slightly. I have the timeline. I have the documentation. I have testimonies from 4 other night shift workers who told Mrs. Obi that the same thing happened to them in previous years. They raised concerns. Their hours were cut. At least 2 of them left the company. He paused. This has been your system for how long? The silence in the room was absolute. Huang turned to Kayamika.
His eyes had gone flat.
You went to the chairman. She came to work, Jisoo said. I went looking. He held Huang's gaze. You're dismissed. Effective immediately. HR will process your exit. Security will accompany you to collect your things. Huang stood. For a moment something ugly moved across his face. He looked at Kayamika with the very specific look of a man who has never been held accountable for anything and cannot understand how this happened. Goodbye, Huang, Jisoo said. After he left, Kayamika let out a long breath. Her hands were tight in her lap. When she looked at Jisoo, her eyes were bright. Are you okay? He asked. I've been waiting for that for 6 months, she said. I didn't think it would ever happen. It should have happened much sooner. She shook her head slowly. You know what's strange? I came here for Ada. For money. That was all. I thought I was going to be invisible here, another migrant, another pair of hands. I didn't think anyone was actually looking. Jisoo said nothing. He thought about the security footage. The girl on the concrete floor. I was looking, he said. It was Jisoo's security chief, Ryu, who first brought him the other problem. 3 weeks after Kayamika started her new role, Ryu appeared in his office doorway with a face that Jisoo knew meant complications. Ryu was 61, former military, and he had exactly 2 expressions, professionally neutral, and we have a serious problem. This was the second one. The Mapo development files, Ryu said. Someone accessed them last night from an internal terminal. Browsing pattern suggests they were specifically searching worker fatality records from the past decade. Jisoo looked up. Who? Ryu placed a single sheet on the desk. A name Jisoo didn't recognize. A photograph he did. Kayamika Obi. Jisoo sat back. Not just browsing. She had accessed records on a former construction manager named Damalola Ease, a Nigerian man who had worked on the Mapo Riverfront Development Project 7 years ago. The records listed him as having died on site. Industrial accident. Case closed. Jisoo pulled the file himself. The death report was 3 paragraphs. Equipment malfunction. Body repatriated to Nigeria. Family notified. He read it twice. Then he called Kayamika. She came to his office at 7 a.m., before most of the floor arrived. She sat down across from him and looked at the file he'd placed on the desk between them and didn't say anything. You want to tell me what you were looking for? He said. A long pause. Then, I was looking for Dammy. He waited. Damalola Ease, she said. My husband's cousin. He came to Seoul 5 years before I did. He was working construction on the Mapo project. He died, that's what we were told. Equipment accident, they said. They sent money home. Condolences letter from the project company. She looked up. But his mother never believed it. She said Dammy had called her 2 days before he died and said he'd found something wrong at the site. That there were workers getting sick from chemical exposure and the site management was falsifying the safety reports to keep the project on schedule. He said he was going to report it. Jisoo was very still. 2 days later, he was dead, Kayamika said. And all the workers who'd been sick, they were transferred to other sites. Scattered. The ones who stayed said they were told not to talk about Dammy. Her hands gripped each other in her lap. I've been looking for 7 years. When I got the job here and found out Dongwon Group managed some of the Mapo project assets, she stopped. That's why you took the night shift. She met his eyes. I needed access to archive floors. I needed time to search.
I'm sorry.
I know it looks exactly like what it is. He kept his voice even. It looks like a woman who came here on purpose. Yes. The nursing credential, the job application. All of it. You planned this. The job is real. I needed money. Those 2 things can both be true. She didn't flinch. I never lied to you about my skills. I never compromised my work. I just also needed to be here.
She paused.
Are you going to fire me for it? Jisoo looked at the file. Then he looked at her. Damalola Ease, age 29, registered on this project under a temporary labor contract. Death ruled accidental. Autopsy waived. Body cremated on-site under emergency biohazard protocol. He looked up. Emergency biohazard protocol for construction fall. Kayamika's eyes sharpened. I know. Jisoo closed the file, opened his desk drawer, pulled out a second file, and placed it on the desk beside the first. Ryu started digging when he found the access log. Kayamika looked at the second file. She didn't reach for it yet. That's a list of 3 other workers from the Mapo project. Different nationalities. 1 Ethiopian, 1 Bangladeshi, 1 Ghanaian. All died within 8 months of each other, across different phases of the project. All ruled accidental. All cremated rapidly. All had made or indicated an intent to make safety complaints in the weeks before they died. Jisoo sat forward. The company that ran labor contracting for Mapo was a subsidiary of a company called Seoul Holdings. He watched her face. Seoul Holdings, she said slowly. Chairman Oh Min-jae. Now running for National Assembly. Campaign platform, labor reform and worker protections. Jisoo's voice was flat. He has announced, specifically, a legislative proposal to improve conditions for migrant construction workers. Kayamika stared at him. He killed them. I believe people in his organization did. Whether he knew, whether he ordered it, or whether he looked the other way, I don't know yet. Jisoo looked at her steadily. But I intend to find out. Why, she said, not suspiciously, genuinely. This isn't your fight. My father died on a construction site when I was 9. Safety violation. Scaffolding that had been flagged as unstable 3 months earlier. The company paid a fine. The project manager retired comfortably to Jeju Island. He turned back to her. I built this organization to make sure I would never be powerless again. I have been very good at using that power for myself. I am apparently now in a phase of my life where I'm attempting to use it for something else. Kayamika was quiet. Then, you're either the most dangerous person I've ever met or the most useful. Possibly both. Almost certainly both. He pushed the second file across the desk. Will you help me? She reached out and took it. They worked through it together over the following 2 weeks. Kayamika pulling records from her side, Ryu pulling surveillance and financial data from his, Jisoo working his network of contacts who owed him answers they'd rather not give. The picture that emerged was careful and ugly. Oh Min-jae's labor contracting subsidiary had been running migrant workers on Mapo under falsified safety certifications. The chemical exposure on sublevel sections of the dig had been known and documented internally since the 2nd month of the project. Rather than halt the work and face delays, the project management had quietly identified the workers most likely to escalate, the ones who had education, language skills, and the specific kind of stubborn conscientiousness that made them dangers to a cover-up. They had been removed. Not all of them by death. Some had been deported on manufactured visa violations. Some had simply had their contracts terminated without cause and been replaced before they could file formal complaints. But 4 of them had died. And the manner of their deaths and the speed with which their bodies had been processed suggested strongly that those deaths were not accidents. He needs this buried, Jisoo said. He's 60 days out from the election. If this surfaces now, his platform collapses and he faces criminal exposure. So he'll do something to stop it, Kayamika said. He'll try. She looked at him across the desk. You're not scared. I've been threatened by people considerably more dangerous than a politician with a checkered labor record. He looked back at her. You're not scared either. I have Ada to think about. So, what you mean is you're terrified, but you're doing it anyway. She smiled at that small, tired reel. Yes, that's what I mean. He arranged protection for her and Ada without asking. He expected an argument. She looked at the security detail, looked at him and said, "Thank you." That was all. The press conference was scheduled for a Thursday. Kayamika wore a dark green dress and kept her hair natural. Ada, who knew something important was happening but not exactly what, put on her yellow hair clips without being asked. "You look beautiful, Mama," she said in the car, and Kayamika held her daughter's hand so tightly she had to remind herself to loosen her grip. Jiso stood at the front of the room. He had never been comfortable with cameras. He had spent most of his professional life specifically avoiding them, but he stood at the podium without visible discomfort and waited for the room to settle. "My name is Park Jiso," he said. "I am the chairman of the Dongwon Group. I am also the person who is about to describe a pattern of criminal conduct by a labor contracting subsidiary that operated within Seoul for the better part of a decade, killing at least 4 migrant workers and covering it up." The room went immediately loud. He waited. "I want to be clear about something before I continue," he said. "I am not a virtuous man. This organization has done things I am not proud of. I am not here because I am morally superior to anyone in this room. I am here because a 7-year-old girl sat in a parking garage for 4 hours one night and told me her mother sleeps in her car, so she can eat. And I looked around at what I had built, and I decided that was not acceptable." Every camera in the room turned toward Kayamika.
She stood.
She had not planned a speech. She spoke anyway. "My name is Kayamika Obi. I am a nurse from Lagos, Nigeria. I came to Seoul 2 years ago for work. I also came because my husband's cousin, Damilola Ease, died here 7 years ago, and I was told it was an accident. I did not believe it then. I don't believe it now." Her accent was full and unguarded, nothing to hide. "He came here for the same reason I did.
To work.
To send money home. To build something for his family. He found something wrong. He tried to do the right thing. And someone decided that was too dangerous to allow." She looked directly at the cameras. "There are 4 families waiting. For people who were treated like they were disposable, like their lives were a liability to be managed. They were not disposable. They were people. They were someone's cousin, someone's son, someone's father. They deserve to be found and named and the truth told about what happened to them." The room exploded. Oh Min-ji's campaign released a statement calling the press conference politically motivated and factually baseless. He held a press event the following morning, stiff-faced beside his attorneys, announcing he would be suing Jiso personally for defamation. By the afternoon, 3 of his former project managers had been contacted by prosecutors. By the following Tuesday, one of them was cooperating. The investigation moved fast once it moved. Ryo had spent years being very good at finding information that people wanted unfound, and he applied that skill now in the opposite direction, surfacing, documenting, providing to the authorities with a specificity that left very little room for maneuvering. The internal chemical exposure reports. The HR directives targeting specific workers. The cremation authorizations that had been processed in hours rather than the days required by law. Oh Min-jae withdrew from the National Assembly race 11 days after the press conference. His arrest followed 8 days later. Kayamika heard about it from Jiso, who called her at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday. She was in the kitchen making jollof rice, Ada at the table arguing with her math homework in the background. "It's done," he said. "Formally arrested. 3 co-defendants in custody. The prosecutors are confident." She turned off the stove, sat down on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet. "Dammy," she said quietly, not to Jiso, to the room, to whatever part of herself had been carrying that name for 7 years. "The investigators have located the site records," Jiso said. "The remains of all 4 workers are being recovered. They'll be able to identify Ease within the next 2 weeks. The government is arranging repatriation. His mother is going to know." Kayamika pressed her hand over her eyes. Her voice, when she found it, was unsteady. "She's been lighting candles for him every Sunday for 7 years. She never stopped believing someone would find the truth. Someone did." A pause. "Then, you did." "We did." A slight pause on his end. "Are you all right?" She laughed. Wet, surprised.
No, but yes.
"Both. That makes sense." Something careful was in his voice. "Kayamika." "Yes. I'd like to take you and Ada to dinner. Not to discuss the case. Just dinner." Ada had appeared in the doorway, still holding her pencil, reading the expression on her mother's face with the attentiveness of a child who has learned to pay close attention to adults' moods. "Mama, who is it?" Kayamika covered the phone. "Mr. Park. He wants to take us to dinner." Ada's face lit up the way small children's faces do, completely and without reserve. Can we go somewhere with pasta? He looks like he knows good pasta places. Kayamika laughed, actually laughed, and said into the phone, Ada requires that you know a good pasta restaurant. A pause. Then Jisa said, in a voice that sounded lighter than she'd ever heard it, tell her I know 3. 3 months passed. The legal proceedings moved through the system. Kayamika testified twice, once in the formal criminal case, once before a parliamentary committee investigating labor practices in the construction sector. She was composed and specific and devastating. Jisoo sat in the back of the gallery both times and did not approach her because she didn't need him to. She had never needed him to. She had just needed someone to remove the obstacles between her and the thing she was going to do anyway. Ada started 2nd grade at a school near the new apartment. She made 2 friends in the first week and sent Jisoo a photo of her classroom because she thought he would want to see her desk. He saved it. Kayamika completed the first stage of her credential recertification. Her supervisor told Jisoo privately that she was the most competent healthcare professional he'd hired in 5 years. On a Saturday in November, Jisoo drove them both to Incheon. A small ceremony for the 4 families whose loved ones were being returned home. Low-key, quiet, specific. Journalists were there, but held at a respectful distance. The families stood with interpreters, with each other, with the particular quietness of people who have waited a very long time for something. Kayamika stood between Jisoo and Ada, Ada's hand in hers. When the name Damalola Ease was spoken, she closed her eyes. Ada, somehow understanding, pressed close against her mother's side. Afterward, walking along the waterfront, Ada ran ahead to look at the ships, and Kayamika and Jisoo walked in a silence that was not uncomfortable.
Thank you, she said.
I've said it 100 times, and it doesn't feel like enough. You don't need to keep saying it. I know. But I want to. She looked at the water. Before Seoul, I had stopped believing that anyone with power would ever use it for something like this. I had decided that was just how the world was arranged, and the only thing to do was to work around it. She glanced at him. You ruined my very convenient cynicism. He almost smiled. I'll do my best not to ruin anything else. She stopped walking. He stopped too. The harbor stretched around them, gray and cold and wide, the city behind them, the sea ahead. Ada's voice carried back on the wind, calling out the names of ships she'd read on their hulls. When I came here, Kayamika said, I had a list. Find the truth about Dammy. Send money home. Keep Ada fed. Stay invisible. She looked at her hands, smooth now, healed, no longer cracked from cleaning chemicals. That list didn't have anything on it about this. Whatever this is. What do you think it is? She turned to face him fully. I think it's the beginning of something I didn't expect and am not sure what to do with. She held his gaze. I'm still grieving Dammy. Not the way I was, not that raw. But he was family. He was the first person who made me believe the world outside Nigeria was survivable. I need more time before I know what I'm ready for. I know. And you're still a complicated man. Your organization has done things that... I know. And Ada adores me, he said, which is statistically unlikely and which I find more frightening than anything else in the story. She laughed, bright and sudden. Take your time, he said. I'm not going anywhere. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand, briefly, just for a moment, the same way she might have taken the hand of someone who had walked a very long road beside her and needed to know she had noticed. Then she let go and called to Ada, and they walked back toward the city together, the 3 of them, into the cold November light. 6 months after the press conference, the Korean government established a new oversight framework for migrant labor contracts in the construction industry. Mandatory independent health monitoring. No rapid cremation without explicit family consent. A protected reporting channel for workers with safety concerns. The lead advocate who had testified before the parliamentary committee, whose face had been in every major newspaper in the country for 3 straight weeks, was a Nigerian nurse named Kayamika Obi, who was completing her medical credentials and had recently been offered a permanent position in Dongwon Group's corporate health division. The night the law passed, Jisoo sent her a message. Just 2 words.
We did.
She sent back 3. You were looking. Ada, reading over her shoulder, said, Mom, are you smiling at your phone? No. You are though. Go to bed, Ada. I'm telling Mr. Park you were smiling. Ada was already running to her room, laughing, knowing exactly how to make a dramatic exit. Kayamika looked at her phone, at those 2 words, at everything they contained, and didn't need to say. She thought about Dami, who had come here 7 years ago believing the world could be better if someone was brave enough to say so. She thought about Ada, who had sat on a parking garage floor for 4 hours and told a powerful stranger the truest thing she knew. She thought about a man who had watched security footage in the middle of the night and decided, for once, to go see for himself. She typed back, Thank you for going downstairs. His reply came immediately. Thank you for raising a daughter who talks to strangers. She laughed, turned off the light, lay in the dark in her warm apartment, her daughter asleep in the next room, Dami's name on a memorial stone, the law with his name in its legislative history, and something in her chest that had been awound for 7 years that was slowly, carefully, becoming something else. Not the end of grief. Grief doesn't end, but the beginning of room beside it. Room for rest. Room for work that meant something. Room for Ada to grow up knowing her family had been heard. Room, maybe, for whatever comes next. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that the things worth holding on to are usually the smallest ones.
Like, subscribe.
Because next time, we're going back into the fire.